Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. It seems like it's just been a while since we were here, but actually, that was just me. I was away last month. This is the Reclamation Project, where we believe in no soul left behind. We're here to provide a platform for both believers and non believers to ask those tough questions, even when they're controversial, seemingly blasphemous, or otherwise offensive. It is our mission to give answers that are rooted in science and evidence where at all possible, but most certainly objective ones that aren't based or depend on our feelings. At the end of the day, it is our hope that you'll achieve a better understanding of God, which we know improves your perception, hence also your impression of Him. After all, understanding is both a difference maker and a deal breaker. And well, if you're already a believer, welcome to the opportunity of perhaps relearning some things in the Bible. So we just thank you. We're just happy that you've joined us. So, I don't think anyone can turn on the news without catching, information, a broadcast on the conflict. So, in light of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the role of American believers comes into question. Should they have any involvement beyond the impartial witness and fair arbiter of the situation? And how should they channel their efforts when faced with conflicts in which they are not direct participants? Panel is here, and they are going to delve into the moral and ethical responsibilities of the American people in addressing crises where they are not immediate stakeholders. So we've got my brother Terrence, and we've got Pastor Andre Campbell with us. Greetings, my brothers.
Greetings.
Man, so this has been in the news now for the past couple of weeks. And, as I was sharing in the green room before coming on, and, it may be hard for us, challenging for us, impossible for some others to not choose sides, but rather look at this conflict from a different angle. And that is, if you're not a stakeholder, meaning you're not from the region, either region, Palestine or Israel, or you don't have family, then that's what I mean by you not being a stakeholder. We're not talking about businesses because that's too easy to have involvement in everything that's going on in the world. So we're not talking about any business stakeholding. So if that's the case, what's our responsibility? If we're not stakeholders, do we have to choose? I mean, what do you guys' thoughts?
Well, something you said just now struck the chord. Am I my brother's keeper? We're all a part of the human family. And so there is a concern because the technology media has made it where we're aware of what's going on. And so, Martin, I think his name was Martin Mueller. I may have the wrong first name, but he was a German theologian who he was the one that said they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't in the trade union, so I didn't say anything. And it kept on going, and then finally they came, and there was no one else to take. No one else to take. It was just me, and there was nobody to speak up. Nobody left to speak up. And so, I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I saw when you sent out the notification for the panel earlier this week, and I was like, "Woo, okay."
How do you
But it's necessary. It's necessary.
All right, I'm gonna come with a more pointed question, but let me let Terrence go ahead and jump in. Just give your first thoughts.
I mean, I would agree. I would concur. I believe that in terms of what our role is, man, our role. Let me back that up. I would say it like this: the American people. I would imagine many of us, like those of us on this panel, feel like many of even the Israeli people who are not in quite agreement with how our governments are moving on this particular issue, right? So in saying that, it reminds me of a story that I've shared on here before where, there was an issue with my sister and myself, and the way that our grandmother settled it was to say that she wasn't on either person's side, but that she was on the side of the truth, right?
Mm.
You have to do what's fair, you have to do what's equitable, and you must do it in love. I have
Mm.
some other points, but I'll save them for later on in this discussion, but I'll stop there.
So, I like what you just said, and I agree with that. What happens in a situation like this is that stakeholders begin to inject in the conversation that your perspective isn't as profound, it isn't as extensive, it isn't as involved in there. So, how can you discern truth, what's right from what's wrong? And so, it sort of aids us in our approach today, where we don't really even take a position on which side is the right side necessarily. But what can we do? Is there anything else that we can do? I mean, are we forced into this position of being of choosing sides, or is there something else that we can do? And let me go ahead and pause
I,
it. Pause it.
yeah.
As believers, what's our
Mhm.
As believers, we definitely are. But let me address something that you just said earlier in terms of, are we forced into this? Optically, we are. Um, because to a Palestinian person from that region that's living currently in that region, to an Israeli person that's currently living in that region, I imagine that I won't say that they cannot, although that's possible, but they do not differentiate between our government and us as a people. And so when it's reported that the Americans are doing thus and thus, then we're all grouped into one box, into one lot. You see? And so for that matter, even though your opinion or your perspective, my opinion, my perspective
Mhm.
may differ from how American leadership is moving, the viewpoint of your city, if you're on the ground out there, is that this is how the Americans feel as a whole.
Right. And so I certainly
Mm.
wouldn't want to be on the ground
Mhm.
because of that. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right. Go ahead, Pastor Dre. You were going to say something
Well, I mean, I think that the
because I
powers that,
don't want to share in the
yeah,
undue punishment.
well, the
No, go ahead.
powers of our world. I don't know. My screen went a little dark on me. You guys can still see me. Can you still hear
I
me?
Yes.
still see you in here.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Yep.
um, I think the powers of our world, and when we say powers, we mean the powers that run this world, the powers that set up the world order, the powers that determine the social contract that we keep, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
That those powers have set us against one another on all fronts, and as long as we're against one another, then we
Mhm.
can't come together for anything of
Mm,
consequence. So,
mm,
thesis versus antithesis, Palestinian against Jew, Palestinian against Oscar Nazi Jew. Because if we're going to go into the depth of it, the Jews that are over there, they know and they don't deny that they are Polish European Jews, Jews by adoption, not by birth or blood. So that
mm,
further complicates the issue that is
mm,
taking place over
Mhm.
there. So how do we transcend that is really where I stand. How because they want to force us into choosing sides, but how do we transcend those sides and choose our synthesis rather than going toward the synthesis that they're trying to give us? And that synthesis is either the Palestinians need to be wiped off or the Israelis need to be checked. And
and
I feel like Terrence, I don't want to pick either one. Neither one is for me.
so, is there a third side, or is there a third option?
We
What?
I think we'd have to dialogue through that. Yeah.
So is there a third side? Is there a third option? Do we have an alternative than to choosing one side or the other?
I think the alternative is simply love. And to expound upon that,
Oh.
to
I think my
expound
phone
on
just
that,
died, Tanisha.
I would say, I would point out rather, when I say love, love would be in the form of, I don't know if it's too early for them to get involved, but entities such as the ICC informing both sides, you know what I
Okay.
mean, that it is not permissible to be bombing hospitals, defenseless people, women and children. Um, on the flip side of that coin is it's not permissible to be bombing what was that music festivals, defenseless people. Now I understand the rules of engagement in war. You know, that's something I've looked
Mm-hmm.
into prior to even this event even happening. So I understand that strategically you're to an advantage if you and I are at war and you bomb one of my military bases. That's totally
Right.
within the realm of war in terms of strategy.
Right. Right.
What is not is what I just previously mentioned, a hospital. You're you're supposed to allow me to gather my wounded, right? In fact, if you want to take it a step further, I took the liberty of looking at, granted, these are not Israeli Christians, so to speak, but let's look at Torah. Even in Torah, when you look at the book of Deuteronomy, I believe it's chapter 20. Let me look at my notes. I believe it's chapter 20, but it talks about, yes, I'm correct. Chapter 20, beginning with verse 10 through 14. It outlines rules of engagement when it comes to war. The same thing can be said on the other side when you speak of the Palestinians, who are predominantly Muslims in this situation. You would look at Surah al-Mumtahanah, verse chapter 60. I mean, excuse me,
Hmm.
60 verses 8 through 9, and there are rules of engagement, how to go peaceably to a person, right? Even when you're in a state of war, it is not required to be so savage and animalistic on either side of that, where innocent people have to be harmed like that. This is not to point the finger at to say who started what. That's not what the interest here is. But the interest is in safeguarding uh, um, the innocent. And so now again, you have a situation where you have these people in situations where they are defenseless. Um,
Okay. All right. So I like that. So let me introduce an idea, not a new one, but just
Trey is trying to get in, by the way. He was asking for the link.
okay. All right. Let me shoot it to him. And so here is here's what I want to introduce this concept. How about not choosing a side at all, but deciding to focus your efforts in a humanitarian way? Because for me personally, my thought is that, you know, I can make an argument. I mean, I'm creative enough to make an argument for either side.
mhm,
Now my heart leans more in one direction,
mhm,
and that's where I'm inclined. That's the position I'm inclined to take
mhm.
in this whole debate. But how about I not do that at all, because I'm not a stakeholder anyways, as I mentioned earlier. And so what if I take a humanitarian point of view? And that's what I wanted to ask too of the believers in America as a Christian. How about we set forth our efforts to um, helping those that are in need on either side. Now, okay, well, now I just said on either side, but let me actually ask,
On
not
either
assuming
side.
that that's true. Yeah, let me not assume that that's true. If I say that I'm going to take the position that I want to provide, I want to help in some way, providing aid to innocent for people who need help.
Mm-hmm.
Am I still choosing sides, or as a believer?
Don't.
But
I wouldn't choose a side.
let me ask the two of you this then. I like what you just said, Stan. And so it sets this up for me. I've never been to Gaza. I've never been to Israel. But what I will say, or what I will suggest to the two of you, and hey, Pastor Trey as well, when you see
Happy Sabbath, glad to be here.
Happy
I'm
Sabbath.
sad.
When you see an unhoused person on the streets of whatever city, we're all in different cities, on the streets of whatever city that you reside in, or that you even are visiting, right? And you see this homeless person, this unhoused person, and the Holy Spirit falls on you and tells you, instructs you to go and see how you can help this person, whether it's something to eat, whether it's a blanket, a jacket, or whatever the case may be. Has it ever entered into your mind to ask that person what type of theology that they subscribe to?
Or what their politics are?
What their politics
No, you don't.
Doesn't make any sense.
Your whole thing is, I see a person that's in need, and I just simply want to help.
And so when I turn on the television, I see people in need on either side. And so I'm compelled to take the position that I will take a humanitarian position. And if I must offer my thoughts, my advice, my money, or my time, I want to help anyone who needs it on either side. So what do you say to other believers? Because, I think I was mentioning this earlier also, it seems as though that there is pressure for everyone, whether you're a stakeholder or not, stakeholder being Pastor Trey, you're from the area or you have family in the area. If you're that, then we understand why you would choose a side. But if you're not that, there still seems to be pressure, though, to pick a side. And everybody's presenting their argument for it. And I'm saying, no, don't try to force my hand. I don't need to choose a side. I'm gonna choose a side of who needs the help right now. I'm choosing love.
So,
Indeed, I am.
And let me say something to that. So choose love, absolutely. I think that's where I heard you going earlier, that if we decide that, listen, I'm going to choose to help rather than choose a side, I believe that's what we're called as Christians to do anyway. Right? That is what we're called to do. And I think we do a lot of other things rather than saying, let me be the change that I want to see. Let me be that helper. Let me be the good Samaritan. There's good works. There's good works that we're called to. And as Christians in these last days, what are we enduring? What are we enduring for? Are we simply saying, hey, persecute me? I want to be persecuted. I'm waiting to get persecuted. No, we get persecuted because we chose love. We chose to help, to serve, to be kind. That's why Christ was persecuted. I didn't hear Trey. Trey started saying something.
Come on, Trey, jump on in there.
Choose to love everybody.
Amen.
Everybody.
I'm reminded of Joshua chapter 5. If you remember that, when Joshua was there and he saw a warrior, he said, are you for us or are you for our enemy? That individual who was the angel said, neither. I'm here on God's assignment.
I'm on God's side. Man, that was the coldest answer.
Let me put something in there. What we're faced with is this. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And they've been at it for a long time. So we have a situation where at the Denver airport, the mural of the New World Order and how we get there is already presented to us. There's a whole mural. Right. And so the forest fires, the cities burning, the animals running for their lives, the children, the next generation being shown. And so at the end of all of this, they gather all of the weapons of war and they declare peace. So we are watching this thing play out in front of our faces. And I watch this guy from time to time. Truth Unedited. I watch him from time to time, and he put together a really good thing on mind control, where he showed that the baby boomers, our parents, were the children of the generation that got hooked on television and began to believe in mass whatever's put across the television.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a bigger thing at play here, and Christians, we don't have time to get caught up in what they've established. People are losing their lives, etc. What can we do for our fellow human beings? Period.
So I like
I love the Polish Jews. I love the Polish Jews, and I love the Persian Philistines.
So, I'm glad you mentioned that. So people getting caught up. That's what you said. That sticks out in my mind. We have a lot of people who I see. Come on, go ahead, Pastor.
There's a great temptation for us to follow the side that's supporting a side.
Right.
America is supporting Israel. For I don't know how long, decades, at least a couple decades.
Right.
1948 or before.
Yeah. So once that happens, that puts us in a precarious situation because obviously we're either supposed to go along with that, or if we speak out against it, now we're being anti-patriotic to our own country. Right. So there's pressure that's there.
Right.
This conflict started actually from the Bible days, and there's some decisions we can actually make outside of the will of God that's not going to be fixed until we get to heaven. So amazing how family now, cousins now, cousins now are at this war, and prophecy is being fulfilled. It has to play out.
So someone comes to you, a believer or a non-believer, and they ask you specifically, what should I do in this crisis? What do you tell them? Because as has been mentioned, there is pressure. And we know that there's pressure because we see people caught up. People are caught up into defending whatever side that they're on. It doesn't matter which side they're on. Everybody's adamant. And they are, what's the word I'm thinking of? They're confident in their position, and they're emotional about whatever position that they take. So we know that people are caught up into it, and that there's pressure to choose a side. But if someone comes to you and asks you what you should be doing, what they should be doing, what do you tell them as a believer? What does God compel you? What does the Holy Spirit compel you to tell them? Because I'm reminded, as you think about that, I'm reminded of another crisis in the Congo. I love that. Yeah. Stephen Mackey, for God so loved the world, not party, not race, not culture. So at some point, as a believer, do we consider that, hey, in our position, in our role as a believer, that we're not to be a respecter of any of these things, but to somehow show some love out of it as God showed love to the world, and that was alluded to a little bit earlier. But, we have a humanitarian crisis that's been going on in the Congo as well, where more lives have been at stake. I believe the last number that I heard was about 6 million people have been displaced, and people being killed in mass graves. And there's fighting there are two sides that are fighting, and they can't come to an agreement. And they haven't come to an agreement that has lasted since the fighting began in the 90s. But I don't hear as much attention given to that.
Right.
Well, that's because some of the same people that are in the battle that we're mentioning on the other side own mines in the Congo,
right,
and extract cobalt and all these other things. So the wars over there are to create instability because the continent of Africa has been slated to come on board and be industrialized. I think the continent is 33 million square miles. So I mean, creating infrastructure there is a big thing, and they're finally. Say it again.
I said you're describing a double standard, is what you're alluding to.
Yeah, it's a double standard. So what's going on in the Congo is a lot more to that than what we see. The death and everything is because it needs to be destabilized stabilized so that the harvesting of these resources or the positioning of certain companies and groups can continue
without oversight and regulation.
without oversight.
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
and
you're right.
you don't have to dig. You don't have to dig deep to find out who is in the companies. They wear black hats and black coats.
You know, it begs the question: is there an end game? Is there an alternative or ulterior motive for the conflict in Israel as well? I don't want to go there because that's going to take us on that choosing sides and who's right and who's wrong. And you know, we're trying to highlight, but it is something to think about that we may have to discuss in a later.
Do we have to choose sides? Do we have to choose sides when we discuss it, or can we simply say that we know that let's add a side. We know that the evangelical Christians believe that Armageddon must take place in the Valley of Megiddo before the rapture and before Christ can come. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, that's part of why America is involved in the way that it is. The red heifers have already been gathered. They plan to rebuild the temple. And how do you rebuild a temple if the Dome of the Rock and other entities are there?
Gotcha.
I wanted to return to the question that Pastor Trey had posed to us earlier in terms of, as American citizens, aren't we kind of, I don't want to use the word forced, but kind of guided into a position on this? And so I'd like for us to stop and just consider, because I understand that Biden and his group are tasking a certain number of troops to be dispatched to that area to assist Israel. And so my point is, I guess, if I'm one of those soldiers, and this is what I'm tasked to do, because I've signed up with whatever arm of the military it is that I'm a part of, but this is what I'm tasked to do. But I am also a Christian. How do you reconcile what your government, by order, because you signed up to do this, is telling you to do versus what your God is calling you to do?
Yeah.
And so
that's a dilemma indeed.
Yeah, and so that carries me. Really, it's not. Really, it's not. It depends on how strong your mustard seed of faith really is. And so it takes me to the book of Acts, chapter 5, where Peter, these brothers are in a bit of a pickle, but not really, because it's all for the glory of God. And so what does Peter say? What does he say? He says in your Bible, Peter says we must obey God rather than people. We must obey God.
That's 529 on
rather
that
than
one.
man, right? And so that's why I say, well, no, it's not really much of a dilemma. And in that situation, even though he would, or the individual, man, woman, whatever, will have refused to act on what government is insisting that they do because they signed up for it. The fact of the matter is, they really haven't chosen a side in terms of Palestinian or Israeli. They've chosen a side. They've chosen the side of love. Right?
Let me put something in there. Are you done, T?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you made me think about this. Stan asked the question, or maybe Terrence might even ask it, about so what is this Israeli-Palestinian conflict in its bigger scheme, right? I've been talking lately about the statue in Daniel, right? Now, I'm historically, grew up Seventh-day Adventist, but I have some views, of course, as you guys know, that may be different. And I believe the stone that was cut without hands has already struck the image, and the image has toppled. Because why would the Revelations and other part of the Bible tell us that Babylon is fallen.
Mm-hmm.
That head of gold, that kingdom has fallen, not only because it was overrun by the Medes and Persians and all of that, but because that stone has struck that image has collapsed. But the question is, what did all of those empires have in common? Because they were not geographically co-located.
Right.
All of those empires in that image, what they had in common was they all controlled the Holy Land. Because they all wanted the power, the common denominator. They all wanted the power that was possessed by the people of God. And so all these thousands of years later now, the Catholic Church, I can talk about it, right? I can say it, because it's not secret. The Catholic Church cloaked itself. I'm quoting Henry Kissinger from his book, World Order. And in his book, World Order, he says the Catholic Church, the Roman Empire realized it could not conquer the world any longer via its soldiers, its foot soldiers, and its ships. It had to cloak itself in spirituality, then it went worldwide. So it went as far, the legs of iron that went down into the feet of iron and clay, the empire went as far as it could. And then Islam started to intersect with it. And so they created some things to work to subvert that, right? Some subterfuge for that. My point being is this: when the Catholic Church, the universal church, cloaked itself in spirituality and really went out into the rest of the world, it now controls the Holy Land. I've been there twice on tours to Israel, and everywhere you go, all the Jesus sites are owned by the Catholic Church.
Is that right? No, I didn't know that one.
So remember, the statue, the one thing they had in common was this place. And for a reason, because they wanted that power that was resident. And that's where the evangelicals come in now, because they believe that there's something special about this location now.
Got it. Interesting. And so everything else is just a matter of is a smokescreen fighting the reasons for choosing sides. All right.
Satan is preparing for his showdown. And his throwdown.
And I received that. So now, you know what? I still get brought back to the question that I posed a little bit earlier, though. If there are some things that are going on behind the scenes that are virtually out of our control because there's not enough of us, because from an individual point of view, we can do nothing to change something on this grander scale. I still get brought back to that original question. What is our role as a believer in all of this? What do we do then? Again, you alluded to earlier, so many people getting caught up seems to not be the thing that we should be doing. So what do we do? What do we do? What's the advice?
Good Samaritan. Spend your time choosing to do the good works that we're called to do. I think too many times Christians, and T, I'm sorry if you want to jump in. I'll just be brief and say, a lot of times as Christians, we think that we're supposed to be quoting Bible scriptures, holding Bible studies, that's our to-do list, right? When in fact, as we endure until the end, as the third angel says, here's the patience of the saints, here are they that maintain the commandments of God and the faith of Christ. So in other words, here are they that maintain, we talked about that a long time ago, maintain the prescriptions of God and have the persuasion of Christ. Why? Because we choose to do it the way Christ did it. When they were going crazy, when they were doing whatever, the Romans are doing whatever, and the children of Israel wanted their savior, their Messiah to come and conquer the Romans, he didn't come and do that. He came with a whole nother, he wasn't mighty, he wasn't memorable, and he wasn't moving. The cross was a stumbling block to the Jew and and foolishness to the Greek. And so at the end, what I'm getting at is what Jesus did was he brought people together. They were coming from Greece, Egypt, all over the world. toward the end, before they killed Jesus, people were coming from all over the world to hear him. This was worldwide. They were coming from everywhere to hear him, traveling from everywhere to be healed, and just to come in contact with him because they heard of this man. And that's what we are to be doing.
I like that. I like that. Can I pick up on you? Pick up on that
Mhm.
real quick and just say, let's go back and let's just make sure that we make that clear. So we have situations that are going on in the world that are beyond the control of individuals, beyond the control of small groups. It really would take an army of a whole country, 100 million, 200 million, in order to make any real dents in changing some of the things that are going on in the world. So we can't do that. And so in order to prevent that from happening, these powers seem to be making sure that we don't unify, that the people don't unify. And so what you seem to be suggesting is, rather than get caught up into all of the struggles,
Unify.
Unify is exactly, that's where I was going. Unify some way or another. We need the people who don't have power and money need to unify. Now we follow God's prescription because everybody's going to have their different formula for how we should unify. I like the formula and the guidelines that the Bible prescribes by way of Jesus Christ, that we love one another and that we do unto others as we would have them do unto us, and the rest we can throw out principles. But I like that idea. That's what I seem to be hearing you say. Let's so that as a strategy, some seem to be working to create conflict.
Mhm.
We need to think strategically. You know what? It's time to unify. We need to find something we can come together on.
While there's conflict, how could we be the healers? While conflict is going on, how can we be the healers? The little girl on the beach, her and her father were out on the beach after a storm, and all the starfish were out there, and they were dying because the sun was coming up now. And she was picking them up one by one and tossing. Remember that story? Tossing them back in one by one. And her father says, "What are you doing? That's not making a difference." And she looked at her dad, and she bent down and picked one up and threw it back in and said, "It made a difference for that one."
That one.
Yeah, synergy is a great thing. God created, that's God's math. That's God's math. Two, that's a law. Two things that come together and create more than themselves. But we're taught either that we're impotent and we can't accomplish anything, or that we just keep coming together and getting the same results over and over again.
Oh man,
we can come together, create synergy.
Broken up.
Choose. Is breaking up.
You're gonna have to go back 10 seconds. Go back 10 seconds.
Okay. I was like, I basically saying, choose our synergy, choose our synthesis, and make a difference no matter how small we think it is. But to sit back and just watch two sides tear each other up, we're buying into that when we choose sides.
Man,
I would wholeheartedly agree with what you said. What I would add to that is that we also need to be very vigilant while we're subscribing to this synergy, because what factions like this, and we know what and who we're up against, have been so successful with in past times up until right now, is to divide and conquer, right? Listen, one thing that I've noticed that no one has spoken to, because we were talking about powers that be, so to speak, right? One thing that I've noticed that no one has spoken to, Article 49 of the Geneva Convention. If Putin, who I do not support, was guilty of any of the crimes that either side has committed thus far in this transfer, in this exchange, should I say, he will be charged with war crimes right here and now. And so we see a sense of favoritism. We see a sense of the goalpost being moved because of what and who is at play. Why is that important? Going back to the synergy that you're speaking of. That's something that we need to fully understand. You know what I mean? If you're going to play with fire, know the power of the fire that you're playing with, right? And so with that being said, again, I go back to how vigilant that we must be in terms of weeding out the wheat from the tares, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to have some, I say this all the time, that every brother ain't a brother, right? And that's so true. And, you know, the Bible even tells you, by their fruits you shall know them, right? And so we have to be paying very careful attention to how we begin to move once this synergy is beginning to take place. Because again, by their fruits you shall know them. If we're supposed to be going to the right and you notice that someone is trying to take us left, that's probably a leaf you need to cut off. You need to prune that
All right.
off.
All right, so we know in a general sense that, you know, unify. That's the word. That's going to be the message for today's discussion, is that when the crisis goes down, if you're not a stakeholder in particular, and particularly also if you're a believer, then that is your signal to unify. Very much like if you're walking down the street and the you know, the sirens in the community go off, signaling that, you know, enemy is incoming, you know, you need to get to shelter. So you hear the siren, you know the protocol. We see the crisis, the protocols that we need to unify. So then the question becomes, how do we do that? Now that might be kind of a challenging question, but let me just leave it there and see what your suggestions are. How and what? How can we do that? So we're not choosing sides. In this particular situation, we've got this crisis between Israel and Palestine, and the pressure is on to choose a side. And whoever you're talking to, they want you to choose their side. Naturally, we need to resist choosing a side, rather unify some way, somehow. But how do we do that? How do we do that? What's
I like that comment right there.
Come on.
There's not choosing sides.
I like that. Come on, Stephen.
Yeah, not choosing sides, but making the right choices.
Making choices. That's right.
We all have to agree that the only way that that's possible is based upon who you're being led by to make those choices in the first place.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
I mean, there's some things that we have not said today because I guess we know that, again, that feeds into the fight.
Indeed.
And yeah, but I mean, because there's some things that should be said, but it's complicated what's going on over there. And again, there's a bigger picture where but I like what Stephen said, choice. We have the power to choose.
But can I also add on?
Yeah.
Let me add this too, that's not the only place where there's a crisis. That's not the only place there's a war.
Right.
It's not the only place people are being either manipulated or pushed into picking sides. There's a bigger war taking place, the great controversy that's taking place. So basically there's drama and conflict everywhere in the world, from each individual home to schools to job to neighborhood, and there's conflict everywhere, and we have to resist the temptation of picking sides and standing on truth.
I'm glad you said that. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it could be like in your home or whatever. You don't pick a favorite or choose a side when your brothers and sisters are arguing. You know, so now this is just a wider scale now, in a global scale, and we don't fall in that pitfall either.
So what you said just brings me back to a little bit earlier when we mentioned the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, arguably a greater humanitarian crisis in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so what you said brings me back to that earlier part of the discussion. I think you got kicked out at the time. And that is, for those who are listening and they're saying to themselves, or maybe they're asking the question of us, you know, what should I do? Because I feel pressure and, you know, I sort of feel, emotionally one side or the other, but I really don't want to get involved in that whole choosing sides. What can I do? I want to offer this as a potential, explanation or response to these individuals. You say to them, "Hey, listen, I'm not going to choose any sides. I'm going to choose the love moniker and the love approach. And by doing that, I want to put my efforts, my time, and my money in humanitarian efforts. And guess what? There just so happens to be another humanitarian crisis going on over here in the DRC that needs my attention. I understand we all can't be at the same place at the same time, but I'm going to go over here." So for those who are feeling like pressure to choose a side, I believe that one way that you can respond to that is that, hey, I'm not choosing a side. I'm about humanitarian efforts, and I'm not allowed to get into the Israeli-Palestinian humanitarian effort because I'm being absorbed over here in the DRC. Do you understand that? As you're telling this to the individual who wants you to choose sides, are you for Palestine? Are you for Israel? I'm not choosing a side. I'm about doing humanitarian work and my efforts over here. I think that's a viable question. And, I just personally, and it's the last thing I'll say, I just don't like pressure. I do not try to force me to choose sides, because I do have some very strong opinions about both sides. But you know what? It makes no. I can't solve it. Even if I told you what side I'm more in favor of, what can I do? But I can help in a humanitarian effort. I can assist there and make a difference. So that's the side I'm gonna choose. Come on, I'm gonna let you guys jump in.
Right.
Well, I'm catching a plane actually in a bit to back to Maryland for a funeral tomorrow for Alvin Kibble's funeral.
Mercy.
That's Alvin Kibble. So I'm a jumping a bit, but I think this deserves a two-parter. I think the next part being what can we do, and can we come together and actually implement something? Using the platform to not only have a voice but to make a difference. This is leading to sustainable development.
Mm-hmm.
This is leading to the ending. Right now, there's a harvesting of weaponry of war. China doesn't want war. China wants to do business, but they will defend their turf because they're going to take Taiwan back under their sovereignty. They found ships at the bottom of the ocean, the sea surrounding Taiwan with Chinese pottery on it. So now they're claiming this is another thing showing that these are our lands. So all of these are happening, coming together. All these pieces are happening. Huh? I didn't hear you.
I was going to say, you talking about China, don't forget their stronghold on Sudan. Yeah, that's whole,
I mean, they got a stronghold all across the globe with the Belt and Road Initiative, where they invested heavily in these other nations building ports so that they will, they'll still preserve their strongholds. But that's the point. They want to do business, not war. So war, to me, is a ruse. It's a distraction for where we're ultimately being sent. But those who get rich from war, they want to harvest war one more good time. Mm-hmm. There's going to be war all over the place.
But when you
talk money to be made.
But when you talk about the attention that one group is garnering over another in reference to even a perceived genocide, that's why I bring up the whole situation with Sudan, which is still now ongoing, because it is actually the nation of China who's out there imploring the Arabs to come in and to kill off the indigenous people so that they can continue to stake claim to the oil and mineral rights of Sudan. And these people are fleeing in droves to neighboring Chad. You know what I mean? Where they're meeting even more resistance from those folks because they have their own problems.
Mm-hmm. So I like what you just mentioned. As we prepare to go around the room and give our final thoughts, Pastor Trey will come up to you next. Part 2 is definitely apropos. This time, I think we can go ahead and get into the choosing sides a little bit. But what I would like to do is do something that I believe there's not enough of it going on in mass media. I would like to have both sides of the coin, individuals who can represent both sides, Palestinian and Israeli, both representatives who can be poised in their delivery of their, of their experience, of their side. But what I'm interested in, and I think people would be interested in knowing or hearing, is what are we missing? What's not being told? Because
Right.
I'm convinced that there has to be some information that is being kept under wraps, and we're not getting it. And we're not over there. That's too far. None of us are going over there to go see anyways ourselves. We're not going to endanger our lives to go over there for what? Just to get some information. But if we have some representatives from both sides, I believe that we can gain some greater depth of understanding into what people are experiencing. And perhaps that can actually cause people to move from one side to the other, or perhaps it can compel them to not want to take a position at all and just take the humanitarian route, which we have already said today is the position that we want to posit for everyone who is listening. But I think that we'll plan to do that in a part 2. Hopefully there won't be any more conflict in 1 month when we're back up, and we won't need to have a discussion. But for some reason, I don't think that's going to happen. So
I don't think that's gonna happen. Yeah. Well, I'll
That's
say this
exactly
before I go, man. Oh, go ahead, Trey.
what Stan was saying was exactly what I was thinking. I was going to go as far as to even ask the question, where can we get the actual the truth and in the news as we understand what's happening around world events or even events happening in America? What news station do you guys listen to that you think is closest to what's really happening without leaving out?
It's called WWW. I'm just making up like a radio station moniker. It's WT Bible prophecy. In other words, that's the news. The news it was told by God through the Bible. The prophetic word. That's the news, because this news is junk.
Yeah, and people definitely, I'll just say this much, people definitely need to look at more than one news source, because if all you do is listen to one, you're only gonna get one side. I've had to incorporate Al Jazeera into my diet so that I can get the perspective of them on the ground there. And so, I use my own synthesizing skill to gather data collection and then come up with a conclusion. But all you watch is one source. I don't care which source it is. Fox, NBC, MSN, CNN. Everybody's got an agenda.
Well, I say this, man. I believe that the Antichrist is preparing an entrance. The Antichrist system, the beast system, is already in place, and they're going to show up and offer us the solution to all of this madness, because it is a conundrum at this point. There's enough information to know that the Jews, the Ashkenazi, Polish, European Jews that are over there since 1948, there's enough information to know that the Palestinians that are there have a gripe. They have a leg to stand on to say, they shouldn't be here. And then the people, the Israelis that are there, they've been there long enough now, have built their infrastructure, have been supported by the rest of the world and whatever, and they feel they have a leg to stand on. So there's a conflict that cannot be resolved under normal circumstances, and I believe that Satan himself is preparing to say, I know how to solve this.
Yeah, gonna come up with something like, yeah. Phenomenal. What about you?
So, final thought. I guess the question on the floor was, basically what it is that we can do, and what is the role of American people. I guess I have to preface that by saying, first and foremost, that I'm a Christian, so I can only approach it and address it from that perspective. In saying that, I wholeheartedly know and understand that my job, my calling, is to show the love of God to the world, to allow the whole rest of the world to know what that looks like.
One side?
I said the whole rest of the world.
Oh no, I was just teasing you. One side or two sides?
But including
All sides.
All sides.
All sides.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is that I have to make sure that I'm sincere and serious in my responsibility with that calling, right? And so I cannot be partial in any way, shape, or form. If it's a Palestinian that needs my help, then I'm to help that Palestinian. If it's an Israeli, whether they're Polish or indigenous, it really does not matter at the end of the day. If someone needs your help,
you
need to help them. And so that's what I meant earlier on when we were asked the question of, do you have to choose, and what will be your choice, and is there a third choice? And that's why decidedly I said yes, there is a third choice, and the third choice is love. You know what I mean? Love is impartial. Love knows no color, knows no boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it would be my attempt to position myself.
Love it.
Pass the baton.
Pastor Trey?
Yeah. Well, a few biblical principles I will highlight. Definitely love. We cannot take sides because no one is without fault. So there's always going to be error on both sides. Always also going to be some good both sides. That's both sides justify the war, by the way, by whatever good that they're doing that they see justifies the evil way of handling it, where the ends justify the means. Christians don't function like that. So, but our kingdom is not work.
Anyway,
but Jesus said,
Amen.
And if it was, we would fight. They're fighting over territory that's all going to burn.
Man, you say that.
So we keep all in prayer, and all these positions that are happening and wars that are happening. It's a fulfillment of prophecy, and we have to make sure, believe really hook, line, and sinker any of the news that's out there in the popular media. We understand facts, but once they start putting a spin on it and making judgment about the facts, I shy away from that. Bottom line is, God has given us the gospel, which is really the only true good news for the world. And our focus should be more on getting out the good news than worrying about all the other earthly news around here. Because if we get the word out to everybody, God said the end will come. We could put an end to all this when the gospel gets to the whole world. So that needs to be our focus.
Got it. Pastor Dre, did you go already?
I went already, man. I think I don't want to mess up what Trey just said.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I appreciate you, gentlemen, once again. As always, good. I think if there's just one take home, hopefully if you came, I'm sorry if you came for the great debate. That wasn't the objective today, and perhaps in part 2, you can satisfy your scandal cravings next month. But today was really about trying to figure out what do we do if we're not stakeholders in it. I think that the response, the answer was unanimous. It was and it was definitive. We need to unify. So when we see the crisis taking place, that's our siren, that's our alarm to know, hey, somehow we got to find some way to unify. And so love it, gentlemen. Appreciate you guys, and man, looking forward to next month.
Hey Trey, we're gonna be
sure, man.
You have a safe flight, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, man.
I'll
be in Southern Cal all next week, man.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. LA.
Man. Well, you get a
come on down. Come on up. All right.
Yeah.
All right, man.
We'll see you.
Take care, Trey.
All right, be blessed.
All right, guys.
Good seeing you, man.
Peace, you too.
All right.
Yeah, you can't come and go without that, brother.
Come on. East Coast meets West Coast. Yes. All right. We'll see you, Pastor.